And then we have the Nazi soldiers and mercenaries finding him. How do they find him, James?
So there's this monkey plant in the Saleh family. Saleh has 15 kids?
Yes.
He's like the 1936 Egyptian Nick Cannon, except it's all with one spouse. The kids bring home this monkey, and you're like, all right, monkey's in the mix. He's going to do monkey shenanigans. Turns out, this is a Nazi monkey. This is a Nazi plant.
Monkey has been compromised, dude.
We know he's a Nazi monkey because he does a little Heil Hitler.
Yeah, he does.
It's a hand gesture. Someone taught him to do that.
Kind of gives him a quick Sieg Heil.
Yeah.
You're like, oh.
What in the jar of a creature?
What about your boss, your Fuhrer?
First, you're like, innocent monkey. You're like, not at all.
This monkey's bad.
There's a big snake in the plane, Doc! Oh, that's just my pet snake, Reggie! I hate snakes, Doc! I hate them!
We're back.
Nowhere to go but down, buddy.
What is poppin', corn dogs? Just play it. It's back. Year 2, season 3, 2-3. Don't get confused. I am your host, Captain Crunch, Jimmy Popcorn, Jimmy Crackcorn. I'm here. It's 2024. Happy New Year, everybody. And with me here is my co-host and best friend, Nick.
Howdy, folks. You came up with the Captain Crunch. I hadn't heard that one yet. So
I think I threw that one out. But, I kind of black out. You black out whenever we start these things. It's just exciting. A new episode's always exciting. And guess what, Nick? A new year is even more exciting. Happy 2024. It's a little late in the month, but I'm still going to say Happy New Year.
All January, you kind of get that. I feel like you get to enjoy the new year still.
But we're pretty late, but still January.
What a way to come back, James, other than starting with our franchise of the year that we picked in our wrap episode last year.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Sorry to do this to you, Nick. Bringing up the wrap episode. A new year. I'm bringing up old shit. I have a stat correction for the quiz.
Oh.
It doesn't change anything because, I still won in a landslide. But technically, you had a question for me, and I just need to, we need to dive into the facts here. So one of your questions in the poppin' round.
Mm-hmm. What movie came the closest to breaking even with the budget?
The Wraith.
That was The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. That was a $30 million budget and like a $29.5 million return.
You're on the sheet with me here, are you?
Yeah.
So let's do the math. So we got 30 million for the budget, and we're going to subtract this box office return of $29,116,320.
Mm-hmm.
So we're coming out to $883,000 next to the budget. However, there's a movie, there's two movies that were closer than that. One is actually, if you look up in season 1, we got Angel Heart, which had a $18 million budget and a $17,200,000 return.
Mm-hmm.
So that's at that 800,000 return. So that's technically closer than Unbearable Weight. But the shocker here is the Wraith has the same dollar amount, 800,000. What were you trying to pull on me, Nick?
Well, that's all very nice and well, but if you're dealing in percentages,
okay,
then the unbearable weight of massive talent is correct.
I knew this was coming.
We deal with percentages, 40-40 offenders, things of that nature, percent that they make back at the box office.
Okay.
That's what people care about, is percentage made back.
Well, you guys say percentage wise. Otherwise, I'm thinking dollar amount. I'm just saying, I threw that answer out my booty, and it kind of was right, but not according to percentages. So doesn't change anything, but just want to keep the integrity of this podcast intact. This is all year 1, folks. So if you haven't listened, please go back and listen to all of our year 1 episodes. They are bangers, despite ass audio in the beginning. But on our wrap party, we spun the wheel of franchises. We landed on Indiana Jones. This is going to be our franchise of the year.
Yeah.
First episode of 2024.
Very excited.
We are watching the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark from 1981.
Started it all.
What actually started it all is the inception of this entire franchise actually spun off from George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. You ever heard of the thing like movie serials?
I've not.
So George Lucas said Indiana Jones is inspired by Saturday matinee cereals. And I'm like, cereal? Like, what are you talking about? Like Captain Crunch? Speaking of Captain Crunch, talking about Fruit Loops? What's going on?
Wow, what a callback already.
Dude,
gosh, season 3 is off to a hot start.
So in the early 20th century, there were actually these like 16 to 20 minute episodic serials that you would go and watch in the theater. So kind of think of like Woody's Roundup, you know, the old timey black and white, like Woody's on the train. What's going to happen? Come on down next Saturday. Meh, meh, meh. Yeah. So
kind of like old TV shows, or, you know, kind of used to be.
And TV is exactly what killed the movie serial game. Because back in the day, people didn't have home television sets. So they would go to the movies and watch these kind of like shorts, 20 minutes, just action packed, kind of niche action adventure stories. So some real life examples are 1943's Batman and 1944's Captain America. The Captain America serial had 15 chapters with a total of 243 minutes. Kind of brings you to an average of 16 minutes of runtime per serial. And then call them episodes.
There's just miniseries. There's miniseries.
Basically, it was television in the movies. That's how it was.
Wait, is serial and series? Are those?
Yeah, no, it's
are those
exactly.
Words? It's pretty much right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, so serial meaning like in a series. So we're thinking modern day, you mean like a television series. And you ask someone from the 40s, they say, "Nah, serial, son. Meh. You go to the movies." Tim Tyler's Luck from the late 30s is probably the closest thing to Indiana Jones. It's like a jungly adventure serial. So I'm assuming this is what George Lucas was thinking about. But George Lucas, he had two ideas back in the day. He's like, I want to do something with space, kind of like the Flash Gordon serial. And I have this archaeologist idea who unearths artifacts with supernatural elements. Obviously, he did the space thing first, which we all know as Star Wars. And Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, they had a planned trip to Hawaii after the release of Star Wars. I don't know if it was Empire Strikes Back or A New Hope. I'm imagining it was after Empire. They were waiting for the grosses to come in, the dollars. And once it killed it, then they're like, all right, cool. Well, what's next on the slate for me? Steven Spielberg he's saying, oh, I want to do something like James Bond. And George Lucas is like, son of a bitch, I got something better. I got this archaeologist idea. Mm-hmm. He gets into one debacle after another, like the good old serials we used to watch. And Spielberg's all like, yo, let's do it.
Makes sense.
And that was the inception of this entire franchise. Funny enough about the title. So this one actually isn't called Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. This one's just called Raiders of the Lost Ark.
The Lost Ark.
However, the rest of them are called Indiana Jones and.
It's almost like they didn't think it was going to start a series, and its popularity, they were like, well, we just got to keep the Indiana Jones story going.
Kind of like Rambo, right? Because the first movie's called First Blood.
Yep. And then it's Rambo.
Yeah. So they're like, let's not commit.
Yeah.
But funny enough, I think Harrison Ford did sign on for 3 movies initially. So I think they knew this was going to go somewhere. Maybe there was like potentials, like if this doesn't go, then you don't have to. But, you know, there were kind of contracts built in like that.
Could have been a marketing thing where the studio said, you know, the name Indiana Jones has become so iconic, we want it in the title because it brings the audience in. People are going to know it's an Indiana Jones movie. That seems pretty likely to me.
Well, speaking of Indiana Jones, the name Indiana does come from Lucas's Malamute dog, who actually kind of resembled Chewbacca. He was named Indiana, and George Lucas is like, I'm going to call him Indiana Smith. And Steven Spielberg's like, I like it, except I don't like Smith. And George is just like, Jones? And Steven says, Jones. Spielberg brought on screenwriter Lawrence Kasdan to write the script. And the other main player in this movie, Marion Ravenwood, played by Karen Allen. Her name actually stems from Lawrence's wife's grandmother, Marion. And he got the last name literally from a side street off of Beverly Glen in Los Angeles. So there it is. That's the inception of Marion Ravenwood.
Names are always better when they, come from real life. Otherwise, you end up with a Snake Plissken. Like, what are we doing here?
Funny enough, Snake Plissken, that's not going to be the first time he's brought up.
No. I will say, as far as titles and names go, I mean, Indiana Jones. I mean, just strike gold.
Amazing.
What a name. What a movie name. Like, the movie could have been bad. Spoiler alert, it's not. But it still would have been epic because Indiana Jones is such a good name.
My thoughts exactly. All right, well, let's dive into Raiders of the Lost Ark. So this movie is directed by Steven Spielberg and stars Harrison Ford, Karen Allen, and Paul Freeman.
We have an estimated budget on this movie of $18 million. We got a worldwide box office of 389 million.
Sheesh.
Holy smokes, man.
You might as well just call it
Holy
390.
smokes.
It's like 389, 900.
0.9. Yeah, I should have rounded up.
We're talking about a 2,166% return.
You've got to be
Holy Ark of the Covenant.
over the moon.
Literally struck treasure.
That is.
That's incredible. So I'm happy we're starting off the year with this movie. It seems like it's going to be a very promising franchise.
Before we jump in, I want to ask you a question, James.
Yeah.
Have you seen these?
So here's the funny thing. I feel like I've seen Raiders of the Lost Ark multiple times, but I feel like I never remember what happens. So I did do a whole trilogy watch during COVID. So I have seen the first 3.
Okay.
Just based on memory. My blanket thoughts on them is Raiders is fun. Temple of Doom was kind of racist. And I want to say that I remember The Last Crusade as actually being my favorite. So I'm really looking forward to watching all 3 of these, and also the Crystal Skull, which I've never seen, and the newest one, Dial of Destiny.
All right. Just wanted to check. For clarity, I've seen the first 4, Raiders through Crystal Skull, and then have not seen Dial of Destiny. So that'll be a fun one to get into.
We're going to watch that near the end of the year. So stick with us, strap in, get your leather jackets on, because we're going to hit you with that log line. Nick?
Sure am. In 1936, archaeologist and adventurer Indiana Jones is hired by the U.S. government to find the Ark of the Covenant before the Nazis can obtain its awesome powers.
I like how they threw out awesome powers. Super sick.
Sick powers. All right, James, let's do it. Plot talk.
Plot talk. Okay, so we open up. This is 1936, South America. I don't think they straight up say Peru, but everywhere online it says they're in a Peruvian temple and Peruvian jungle. So I guess we're in Peru.
That's where we're at.
This is actually filmed in Hawaii. Shocker. But we open up on the Paramount logo, which fades into a real life mountain that they actually location scouted in Hawaii because Steven Spielberg wanted to transition into a mountain from the Paramount logo. And we are introduced to Indiana Jones, played by Harrison Ford. Now, I got to say, this entire character intro of Indiana Jones is near perfection, honestly. He's walking through, I guess, with 2 Peruvian guides.
Mm-hmm.
One of the guides actually played by Vic Tablion. That's his name. He plays Barranca. So he seems to be trying to pull a double cross on Mr. Jones, but he cocks the gun and Indiana Jones, without seeing his face, we just have a silhouette, disarms this fool with his whip, and the baddie goes running off like a scared guy. And then we see Harrison Ford, rugged leather jacket, Aussie hat, walk in the frame. He steps into the light and you're just thinking, sick. That was badass. There's so much being said with his actions, with the editing, and his costume, actually. The costume designer, Deborah Nadoolman, personally aged Harrison Ford's brown leather jacket with a steel brush. She's like, this shit's got to make it look like he's been down and dirty wearing this every day. So there's just like so much being said, from the costume to the action and the way it's edited and the lighting. And this is just a small part of the intro. I'm counting this entire first scene as the introduction of Indiana Jones, and it is great.
One thing I love about the introduction, personally, is he's making his way through this temple and he's avoiding all these booby traps and he knows his way around. There's 2 ways you can introduce a character, either like their origin, the way the character becomes a character, or you just pick up at some random point in time. And maybe that's from the serial. Maybe serials used to do that, where it was just, yep, here's a point in time, here's the niche, here's a cowboy riding in, and you just assume that they're already an expert at their craft. And Indiana Jones is already an expert at his craft. And you could tell that right off the bat. So there's no real like learning curve he's going to have to go through. You're like, oh, this guy's the man. And we're starting out with him as the man. And we're going to go through one of these adventures. And I love it. I love an intro like that.
And that's actually in contrast to our franchise from last year of Mad Max, where the entire first movie was kind of his origin story.
Mm-hmm.
So it's refreshing and it's a good way to go about it. Just give us a 10-minute snippet into this guy's life. We don't need a lot of words said, and we understand who this guy is and what he's about. So got to say, hell of an introductory scene. Like you said, they do go into this temple and they are going for this golden Peruvian idol. They actually do rig this thing's eyes to move, and you can catch it slightly moving. I think they want to make it part of the plot, or maybe just drop a hint about the supernatural elements to come in this movie, but they end up cutting whatever they were going to do that for. But you do catch the eyes moving. Just the square up scene with Harrison Ford and this idol where he's got like his hand on his chin and he's treating this burgle with so much respect, and he's dumping the sand to replace the weight. You're just understanding who this guy is. You're thinking he's a professional treasure hunter and a badass. I'm getting that. He knows where to look for the booby traps, and it's perfect.
Yeah. And along with he's a professional treasure hunter, we'll find this out a little later on, but he's also a very, respectful archaeologist, right? So he's not trying to get this for himself. He wants to gather all these things for the purpose of, higher education and studying them and learning things. So he's not a thief per se. He's much more of a, archaeologist, badass archaeologist with the skills of like a treasure hunter.
Yeah, and they kind of hint at the conflict of grave robbing versus respecting the artifacts in the movie. So that's kind of like a little conflict that Indiana Jones has to go through. Mm-hmm. Along with him, actually, is Alfred Molina. This was his first major feature film. And the tarantula scene where there's a bunch of tarantulas on his back, that was his first film scene on camera work for this movie. So so I was watching this like documentary of how it was made, and Alfred Molina is explaining that the spider wrangler just showed up with a suitcase full of tarantulas, put a dozen on them, and they weren't moving.
That's my nightmare.
And Nick hates spiders, so do not send Nick a pet spider.
Yeah, you'd be a psychopath if you did that.
They put a dozen on them, and they weren't moving. And Steven Spielberg is all like, "Why aren't they moving?" The spider wrangler chimes in and says, "Oh, I need to put a female in there, and then they'll start fighting." And he drops a female in. And according to Molina, all hell broke loose with the spiders. So my nightmare.
Absolutely.
But really cool to see Doc Ock early role in there. But that's not the only piece of peril in this temple. There is a giant boulder that chases Indiana Jones.
Oh, the famous giant boulder.
Super famous. So this ball boulder actually was Spielberg's idea. However, the production designer, Norman Reynolds, who was on Star Wars with George Lucas, it was actually his handiwork that made it come to life. And obviously the entire art department, because you need construction to build this boulder. And Reynolds comes up with the grand idea of how to actually make it a reality. So it's this like 22-foot diameter fiberglass boulder. And it's just insane how someone like Spielberg can say, I want him to get chased by a giant boulder. And then they create it. The execution by these guys is perfect. And Steven Spielberg loves it. He says, I need to extend this scene now. It's not going to be 5 seconds. It's going to be 20 seconds. And it just grew into like a iconic symbol of the franchise. And it's even in the ride. So it's funny to think about filmmaking like that and the repercussions of branding.
I mean, if you are in 1981, you go to the theater, you don't know much about this movie, and you sit down those first 10, 15 minutes, you're like, sold. Let's do this.
Boom.
I'll follow Indy wherever he goes.
So we're in the temple. Obviously, there has to be a give me the lamp moment with Alfred Molina.
Oh, I did not want him to turn bad. After Indy saved his life.
I knew he was going to do that only because I've seen this a year or two ago.
Yeah.
So I knew it was coming, but come on, Alfred.
Alfred gets his.
He gets impaled by one of the traps that is, it's triggered by light sensors. So I have questions about how the fictional Jovito tribe rigged these booby traps in the temple that are somehow triggered by light sensors from natural light. So I have questions about that, and we can dive into that during nitpicks.
Yeah. Well, I think they're like floor sensors, but everyone usually walks on the lighted path. And so he was saying, just stay out of the light, because that's probably where the sensors are.
But he puts his hand up in the light and then it triggers it. So that doesn't have anything to do with the floor.
No, they're just advanced. They're just advanced.
The Jovitos are just
22 foot boulders
and a perfect track for it to roll down. So I guess they might be way ahead of their time as far as technology and booby trap technology.
Although it would kind of fit with like the supernatural nature of the movie. And maybe this tribe was just advanced.
I did think about that, and I thought, okay, that could be your bailout for the light sensors.
That's the cheap bailout.
Indiana Jones obviously gets out of this pickle, finds a super dead Alfred Molina. He got impaled by one of the spiky traps. He grabs the idol, he grabs his whip, and comes out only to find that same guy who pointed the gun at him and he disarmed, standing with the tribe of Jovitos. However, Homeboy falls flat on his face, and he's got like 30 spiky darts in his back.
Yeah, the tribe has gotten to him.
Great reveal, because you're thinking, oh no, he turned them into the tribe. Nope, the tribe hella killed him. However, who is working with the tribe is Indiana Jones' rival archaeologist, his adversary, Renee Belloc, played by Paul Freeman.
Oh, Renee.
Is it Renee or Reen?
Renee, very French.
We only call him Belloc in the movie, so I don't know.
Yeah, like James said, this is a rival archaeologist, and so they're constantly trying to get to the treasure first. And this is where we learn that he's more virtuous, Indiana Jones is. He's trying to get his hands on these before real grave robbers come in and take it for a profit. So really, it's this race against time. It's going to be one of those movies where they're constantly, one step ahead of each other the whole time, trying to get after things. One's a little smarter, one's a little more cunning.
I don't know if that is from the serials that George Lucas and Steven Spielberg grew up watching, like if that was a trope in the serials, but it 100% is a trope in treasure hunting movies from Raiders to modern day. So that is going to be an annoying conflict.
Yeah, I think about National Treasure, same formula.
Uncharted, Tomb Raider.
We saw it in Fifth Element.
Fifth Element, yeah. So it's going to be a thing. So, of course, Belloc, working with the Jovita tribe, grabs the idol, and Indiana Jones is able to escape because he holds up the idol and the Jovitos bow down. However, being on Belloc's payroll, after Indiana Jones takes off, he's running towards his seaplane that's in the river. The pilot's like catching alligators or something. And he's running to the plane. One of the tribe guys just shoots an arrow like 30 feet up into the trees. And you're like, okay, they obviously instructed this guy, don't hit Harrison Ford with an arrow because then the shoot's over. So he shoots it way up in the trees.
Safe.
And they get to the plane, and I don't know if you caught this, Nick, but when it starts up, they actually snuck in a Star Wars Easter egg. It sounds exactly like the Millennium Falcon when it's powering down or starting up.
I didn't catch that.
I heard it, and I thought, is that a Star Wars spaceship sound effect? And looking it up after the fact, 100% true. There's a couple Star Wars Easter eggs in here.
Indiana Jones escapes. Indy escapes. He returns to the United States where he's an archaeologist professor, clean cut, by day, which I forgot about that. He like shows up and he's just, suit, tie. I'm like, oh, this guy. Yeah. Double life kind of.
So the character intro in Peru, you're thinking, okay, first 7.5 minutes, complete badass. And then the next 7.5 or 6 minutes, he's kind of like a goofy guy running away from tribe members and he gets duped. So he's not like a Snake Plissken where it's just like whatever I say goes and I always win. It's just, I did all the hard work. I got bamboozled. Now I'm just improvising, getting out of this pickle. And I kind of look like a goofy guy running away. So you're like, okay, cool. Badass, compromised. And then we go into this professor scene and you're thinking, oh, he's an intelligent guy. He's a professor. So we're getting a nice, well-rounded, we know what this guy's about. He can get down and dirty, but at the same time, he is very knowledgeable about what he's getting down and dirty about.
And so what happens is he's teaching and he gets approached by the government, by some U.S. agents.
Worst.
So there's 2 Army intelligence officers and they come in and they basically detail this plot where the Nazis are going to try and steal the Ark of the Covenant to help them in the war effort. Remember, this is 1936. So it's the rise of the Nazis.
That's a crazy plot point to throw in. And I hate to interject here, but Major Eaton is played by a gentleman named William Hootkins. And this is actually Red 6, a.k.a. Porkins in Star Wars: A New Hope, and one of the fighter pilots.
Red 6 standing by.
We also previously saw this guy as Eckert in Batman, 1989.
Oh.
That was Eckert. He looked super different, didn't he?
Big time.
I guess 8 years. Well, maybe he had too many donuts over that 8 years. I don't know.
A lot can happen in 8 years.
He was a little bit more. He was a little more clean cut in Raiders.
Yeah,
he was the more brash one. That was like the other guy was saying, "Oh, well, we've uncovered some. We have suspicions." Blah blah blah. And then Major Eaton was like, "Listen, the Nazis are trying to steal the Ark of the Covenant. What are you gonna do about it?
We need your help."
So that's Eckert from Batman.
Indiana Jones, James, I think you pointed this out. He just has this big ass book and he just flips it open to the page.
Yeah. He's like,
and right now, apparently, there's some kind of German archaeological dig going on in the desert outside of Cairo.
Now, we've got some information here, but we can't make anything out of it, and maybe you can.
Indiana Jones says, "Oh, they've discovered Tanis," and then they're like, "What's Tanis?"
Well, the city of Tanis is one of the possible resting places of the Lost Ark.
The Lost Ark?
Yeah, the Ark of the Covenant, the chest the Hebrews used to carry around the Ten Commandments.
What do you mean, Ten Commandments? You're talking about the 10 Commandments?
Yes, the actual 10 Commandments, the original stone tablets that Moses brought down out of Mount Horeb and smashed, if you believe in that sort of thing.
So they suspect that the Ark of the Covenant is in this buried city of Tanis, and then they say, "Oh, you know about this?" And Indiana Jones is all like, "Yo, look at this fat book I brought in." Plops it down. This thing has like a buckle on it. It's about 8 inches thick.
God, we used to be a proper country. We had books with buckles on them.
We had leather-bound books. We had leather-bound buckle books. And Indiana Jones just opens it up directly to the Ark of the Covenant page. He's like, "You mean this?"
There's a picture of it right here.
Yeah. I kind of like this scene, though, because over the next 30 seconds, Indy basically lays out what the plan's going to be. He's like, "All right, I'm going to need this medallion, and then I'm going to need this staff that's a certain height, and then that's going to show us where it is." You're like, "All right, so we've laid out the next 45 minutes of the movie. These are the things we're going to have to do." And he has to go find his old mentor, I think, Abner Ravenwood, and that's step one.
Abner Ravenwood's name was in the coded Nazi messages or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they did some digging and they're like, "Okay, Indiana Jones is associated with Abner Ravenwood. Let's see what he's about."
And then we get a fun scene. Not really a scene. It's maybe montage. So you get your music and you get like would you call it like kind of transparently imposed?
Oh yeah.
Map,
I was wondering.
And then the plane.
I don't know. No, this can't be the first one to do it.
Okay.
I'm sure there's
this was my question too. Yeah.
I'm sure there's like I can see something like Casablanca doing it. I've never seen Casablanca, but it's the thing where there's like a art style map and then the airplane is flying over countries with a red line behind it.
Yep.
And then it touches down on airports and then a dot is on the map and then it creates a new red line to a new location. So we get one of those. It's very vintage looking, world travel-y, and we travel into Nepal.
Indy, looking for Abner Ravenwood, comes across his daughter, Marion. Now, this is Karen Allen, and we are introduced to Marion. How are we introduced to her, James?
She's an alcoholic, Nick.
Raging alcoholic.
She's
again, doing drinking games for money.
This is not as long of a character intro as Indiana Jones, but this is also a really good character intro because Marion is drinking in a drinking contest with this gentleman, and she's kind of pretending like she's gonna pass out, and then she's all like, "Just kidding, I'm hella sober because I'm a high functioning alcoholic, bitch."
I have a problem.
Because my dad is super dead. We learned that Abner Ravenwood is dead, and so did he just own this bar in Nepal? How did Indiana Jones know to come here?
I don't think that was ever brought up.
Not brought up, not explained, but Indiana Jones does come to this bar in Nepal. And there's a super great use of lighting and silhouettes, how Indiana Jones enters the room because...
Oh, so iconic. You just see the hat.
Yeah, shadows casted on the wall. And again, just great character building visually for Indiana Jones.
We also learned that Marion and Indy had a thing. And apparently Indy broke her heart. She is not happy about it.
It's also a little suspicious because it sounded like there was a big, maybe age difference with it.
Yeah, because when she's mad, she's like, "I was just a girl."
She's like, "I was a child," and then I was like,
"Whoa, Indy!
Is Indiana Jones pulling like a Josh Giddey on us right now?"
Yikes!
Is he Indiana Josh Giddey? Because I don't like that. Hey, 1936, different times. who cares?
Different times. But it could have been she was 18 and he was 25. And she's like, I was just a kid. It's like, it could be colloquial, he said. I'm not going to sit here and accuse Indiana Jones of being a pedophile.
They really gloss over it. He's like, yeah. Shut up. I need this medallion, bitch.
And so she's like, all right, come back tomorrow and we'll discuss it. She's like, I know where it is. Of course, what happens in the meantime? Nazis show up. So again, like you said, James, it's one of those movies where like everyone just happens to show up at the same place because they're all kind of following the same leads. We were told that the Nazis knew about Abner Ravenwood, so it's not too surprising that they tracked her down.
Well, they only tracked her down because there was the German, I think it's homeboy, Ronald Lacey. He plays this character. Is it Toht? Or is it Toit? Toit, like a tiger? It's Toht.
Tot, probably Tot, like Tottenham.
So Ronald Lacey plays Toht. He is the German guy with the, what is that, a fedora?
Very evil looking hat, like an old James Bond villain.
Yeah.
Kind of hat.
Like a short stack. What's
bowler
his name?
Hat? Like
Odd Job.
Odd Job.
Odd Job. Yeah, short stack.
Short stack.
Random task. So he was on the plane tracking Indy. So that's how he followed him to this bar in Nepal. Marion, like an idiot, who apparently is rocking the medallion 24/7 because she's
it's on a necklace. Yeah.
She says, I don't know what you're talking about. Come back tomorrow. And then she pulls, it's like a wrapper chain. It's like a Jesus piece around her neck. And I'm like, you wear that all the time? That's super heavy and big.
Pretty irresponsible too. It should be like in a safe.
And what's more irresponsible is she just randomly takes it off and just sets it down on the table, like in the open. It's like, why would you do that?
Because she's an alcoholic, James.
She's drunk right now.
She's lost all her discernment.
So of course the baddies come in. Nazis are playing nice, but then they play mean. And toy like a toyga grabs the little Bernie stick, the iron rod from the fireplace, and the goons got Marion in a chokehold, and he's like, give me the medallion right now or I'm burning your face.
Yeah, she offers them a drink. She's like, I don't know,
she's an
how
alcoholic.
you guys do business. Yeah. And he's like, here's how I'm used to doing business. They just grab her and he pulls the hot poker out of the fire. I don't know why that's there. I don't know who they're branding in this bar, but they're about to brand her.
And of course, Indiana Jones comes in. He never left. He was watching the whole time.
How does he come in? Comes in with the whip again. That whip.
Dude, yeah.
The man knows how to use that whip.
He knows whipcraft for sure. And there's a big shootout and Toht grabs the medallion, but it's on fire. So it kind of burns his hand and he drops it. They don't walk away with the medallion. And Indy is able to deflect all these Nazis and these goons. They escape, although the bar does burn down.
These village people were probably very confused.
Yeah.
The Nazis just came in, burned down the bar, and then the owner's gone. You're like,
all right,
just another day in the Nepal mountains.
I guess the one bar on this cliffside is gone.
That sucks.
We got the medallion. Marion's like, yo, you need me. We're partners. Let's go, baby. And we're off to Cairo.
Yep.
Now, Robert Watts, who was an associate producer on this movie, he was also a production supervisor on A New Hope. And he was asking, hey, do we have to go to Egypt for this movie? Are we going to see the pyramids? Are we going to see the Sphinx? And Spielberg's like, no, we're just going to kind of be in the streets. And he says, perfect. We're going to Tunisia instead. Let's get a double for Egypt. One, it's because they've been there before. It doubles as Tatooine. And they actually filmed the Cairo city streets in this town called Kairouan, which actually translates to Little Cairo, which is funny enough.
That's convenient.
Right. So this is actually the town that they film in, and they film in the deserts of Tunisia. Apparently they shot there for 4.5 weeks, and most of the crew got super sick. Spielberg, who avoided getting sick because he was mostly eating out of canned foods from the UK. He would just like pop a can open of cold food, and it was like super hot. It was hard to breathe. All the other cast and crew would eat at like the hotels and the restaurants. And Nick, you know, when you travel, like just the water, eating other foods that you're not used to.
Oh yeah.
Your body's not used to it. So apparently everyone was like hella sick.
Basically going to shock.
Yeah. Tunisia doubles as our Cairo, Egypt in this movie.
Very nice.
And they meet up with an accomplice, a friend, colleague named Sala. He's played by is it Rhys? Is it John Rhys Davis?
John Rhys Davies, who I love because I know him as Gimli from The Lord of the Rings, and he's in a lot of stuff. I mean, if you look at his work, I was looking through his whole body of work. I saw that he actually shows back up in Dial of Destiny, apparently. So that's cool. So yeah, he's been in a ton, just a lot of consistent work. So good for him. John, I mean, he's a face that if you see him, you're like, oh yeah, that guy.
So Sala, he plays an Egyptian digger because Indiana Jones says, you're the best digger in Egypt. And you're like, all right, I guess digging is a big industry over there. But per Spielberg, the first person he actually offered the role of Sala to was Danny DeVito.
Oh my gosh. Could you imagine?
Yeah, because apparently he was described as a 5'2" skinny Egyptian digger. I couldn't really imagine Danny DeVito as Sala because John Rhys Davies just killed it at this role. It's reported that Danny DeVito was on a TV show and the schedule wouldn't really allow for it, despite really wanting to be in the Raiders of the Lost Ark movie. I assume it was Taxi with Tony Danza and Christopher Lloyd, because that ran from 78 to 83 and Raiders was shooting during the summer of 1980.
Yeah, it had to be.
So Dan DeVito's out. John Rhys Davies is in. And funny enough, Sala's first words is
Cairo, city of the living.
That's funny because they're about to run into a bunch of living spirits and a bunch of dead bodies.
Oh, nice. A little bit of wordplay. The next thing Sala reveals is that Belloc, our rival... Belloc, our rival archaeologist who stole the idol from the first scene, he is assisting the Nazis. So
Bastard.
We got our arch rival.
This dude showed up in Peru with the Jovitos, the Hornitos crew, and now he's working with the Nazis? What a dick.
Yeah, he does not care. He's basically a mercenary, right? He's
basically just out to be a problem. He's anti-Indiana Jones, is what we're gathering.
Yeah.
There's like two unrelated instances where he's dicked him over.
Yeah, it seems like this has probably happened multiple times before too, because they are on a name basis. And then we have the Nazi soldiers and mercenaries finding him. How do they find him, James?
So there's this monkey plant in the Sala family. Funny enough, this monkey who appears to be adorable and a little side character in the Sala scene with his family, we see him meet up with this shady looking guy with an eye patch. And you're like, so something's going on with this guy. Don't call it a comeback, Nick, because this is Vic Tablion, who played the guy in the Peru scene with the gun. He's back. He's playing a different character.
Or is he?
He plays Barranca in the Peru scene, and then he also plays Eye Patch Guy in the Cairo scenes. So he's the guy who planted this monkey. No, I'm not joking. And this is not the first time that they reused an actor in this movie.
I don't think you're joking. I just
flat out didn't even notice.
Won't audiences notice? Slap an eye patch on him. They'll never tell. Exactly. Eye patch and a turban, I think he had on.
This guy can play a Peruvian. He can play an Egyptian. It's all good. So this is a return of the Vic. He planted the Nazi monkey spy into the Sala family, and he's conspiring with this Eye Patch Guy. And then Eye Patch Guy just dispatches Belloc's Nazi goon, but they're kind of like locals. They're local Egyptians that like attack Indiana Jones and Marion.
Local mercenaries and Nazis all in cahoots. My favorite part of this was a few favorite parts, but as soon as the mercenaries attack Indiana Jones and Marion, like the whole crowd just kind of like steps back and forms a circle and starts like chanting like it's a fight club.
It's a school fight.
Yeah. They're all like, yeah,
fight.
What is happening here?
Not a lot in Cairo.
Also a lot of what I would call nonchalant chases. Like Marion's running away and the guy chasing her is kind of doing a light jog. Even like taking corners, he's just kind of like slows down, takes the corner. There's a lot of light jogging.
Karen Allen's not that fast, so they kind of have to do the thing where
exactly.
It's like, okay, don't look like you can run fast.
Yeah, it's like this guy's not sprinting.
But Marion, while Indiana Jones is in the super choreographed one by one fight scene, like you go in, okay, you got defeated. Now you go in, okay, you got defeated. Marion, meanwhile, I don't know if you noticed this, in the background, she's just beating two guys with a metal box.
I did.
AKA beatboxing, for about 10 seconds while Harrison Ford is going through one-on-one choreographed fight moves.
She's just beating the shit out of those dudes.
Repetitively, just box overhead, just boom, boom, boom. I'm like, geez.
This is also the famous scene where the crowd parts. Indiana Jones just got done fighting. The crowd parts, and there's a guy with a sword, and he starts doing all the sword tricks. And Indiana Jones just looks at him, pulls out his gun, and just pow.
Great character moment. And this actually did stem from the sickness that I was talking about. I think I heard somewhere that Harrison Ford was going through an illness because of just like the heat or the food or the water. And they apparently choreographed this entire sword fight scene. And they figured, you know what, just it's not an Indiana Jones thing to stoop down to the sword game.
Yeah.
What about the gun, dude? It's a great moment in this movie.
It is. Like you said before with the boulder, it's funny how these little decisions end up becoming so iconic, because it really is such an iconic scene for this movie. Marion is seemingly killed after she gets taken in a basket and then like carried away. And it's almost like the Scooby-Doo moment where she's like, Indy, he, like runs through the crowd and looks, and then he like looks down a little like side alley, and then the basket's getting carried this way. He's like, oh, that way. And then he chases her down, and then he like turns the corner, and there's like 40 people with baskets being carried, and you're like, oh my gosh.
During
like,
the shell game scene, he just starts like tearing down all the baskets, and all the villagers like, what the hell, dude?
What is happening?
This white guy coming in here and messing with my basket.
Marion's thrown into a back of a truck that has a bunch of boxes that say explosive on it, so that we know that it's explosive.
It's
There's
dangerous.
a whole chase scene. Truck crashes, explosion. I would like to give credit to Spielberg here during the scene. Indiana Jones fires 5 shots. That plus the one that he shot at the guy with the sword, 6 shots in the revolver. I was like, hey, I always count bullets when it's a revolver. So little things.
I actually thought of you during the Nepal bar shootout because I thought Indiana Jones had a revolver and he was shooting off way more shots, but he didn't have a revolver. It was like
he had a pistol.
Like old timey, World War II era pistol.
Yeah, like a Ruger almost. Yeah.
I'll let slide. Yeah, pass.
So we think Marion's dead and Jones is depressed. He starts drinking away his troubles.
Just like Marion would do. He starts drinking. There is this, he does engage with Belloc. We get this little kind of meeting of the hero and the hero guy, the villain. And Belloc basically gives him the old, we're not so different speech. It feels a little bit shoehorny of a story and conflict, because Belloc is saying, hey, he literally says, I'm a shadowy reflection of you. Like I am the dark side version of you. So you should come over to the dark, step away from the light. They overtly say that. They're trying to still keep this storyline going throughout all this visual action gags and storytelling through set pieces being destroyed and guns and swords. And so they're trying to upkeep this story and keep it intact. So we do get this kind of one-on-one between Belloc and Indiana Jones, because you always need that in the treasure hunting movie, because they're obviously never going to be in the same room that often.
Yeah.
So you kind of need to force them to have this one-on-one dichotomy of philosophies. And in this scene, Belloc is saying, archaeology is our religion, but we both fell away from our faith. It's basically like, it's a fine line between being obsessed with the treasure and obtaining it and being obsessed with the treasure and protecting it. That's kind of what this whole conversation is trying to convey to the audience.
Basically, Indy, you're so close to being me. And then, like every good, we're not so different speech. But.
Yeah, exactly.
However, Indy still does have that medallion, and he takes it to an imam who deciphers the medallion. It's one of Salah's friends. And he deciphers the medallion. One side of it says basically it's a warning. It's like, don't disturb the ark. Like, I know that there's this medallion telling you where it is, but don't use it, dude. Whatever you do. And the other side tells you how to get to the ark. So I don't know who made this medallion, because if you're trying to say don't do it, you would never give the directions on the other side. But the other side gives you the measurements for the staff of Ra.
Well, one side does give you measurements, but the other side says, but wait, you have to subtract a measurement.
Yeah.
We discovered the Nazis and Belloc are digging in the wrong area because they got this copy of the medallion from Tote's toy like a tiger's burnt hand. It got
but only
scarred.
one side.
Luckily, the super informational side got burned into his hand, and the other side that said subtract 1 measurement was omitted from the equation.
So Jones and Sala realize the Nazis are digging wrong, and so they're gonna go do it right. So they infiltrate the Nazi dig site,
and we say infiltrate. I say they waltz on into it,
and they use the medallion to the correct size staff of raw. So you basically have to have a certain length stick, put the medallion on top, put it in this place. The sun will shine through it and point on this like miniature figure of the city.
Bingo.
That exists there. They find where the Ark's resting place actually is. Now, for me, this little model of the city, it points to the exact middle like temple of the city. I'm like, it's so quite obviously there, guys. You didn't need the staff of Ra.
If you were to blindly guess, just start there. Yeah.
That'd be my first guess. And then so that the Nazis don't get his stick of the right size, he just like snaps it in half and like tosses it to the side. I'm like, they could just tape the stick back together. Like, you're gonna have to do better than that.
They do uncover the Well of Souls, and there's hella snakes down there. And what does Indiana Jones hate? He hates snakes.
Had to be snakes.
So they must have had like 10,000 real snakes. Some of them were actually legless lizards that doubled as snakes, but there was a lot of snakes in there. And so the initial 2,000 snakes that they had didn't do squat in covering the entire set, because Spielberg is saying, I need to do wide shots and see snakes covering the floor. This is pre-CGI. So
what are those 10,000 snakes down there eating while they're locked up for thousands of years? We don't know.
We have no idea.
They're just there being snakes.
The real life snakes, however, they do be eating crew members, because Steven Spielberg, he's like, yo, we need more snakes. Let's get more snake wranglers out here. They started out with tiny snakes, and then they got non-poisonous pythons, which apparently are big biters, and they like to latch on to people.
Wouldn't know. I don't mess with snakes.
No, I would never. One of these pythons actually bit the first assistant director, David Tomlin, on the hand, and it wouldn't let go. David Tomlin was like, hey, someone pick up this tail and just give it a good like whack, snap it, and it'll let go. And Spielberg's like, I don't know how he knew this, but apparently that worked. So the snake was fine. They patched up David, and they kept on going. There was so much snakes on set. Glass snakes, legless lizards, pythons, and then the cobras, which are actually poisonous and venomous.
Wildly. Yeah.
Yeah. So they achieved this by putting them in glass tanks. In the original cut, you can see the snake's reflection on the glass when he's face to face with Harrison Ford. However, in the DVD and Blu-ray and streaming cuts, they obviously can wipe this in post, but you could kind of see it in the original release.
Hey, that's a better option than being actually face to face with the Cobra.
Yeah.
So you take that as a win. Marion and Indy get tossed into the pit. Marion is alive. Obviously, she was captured, and so she is alive.
Well, yeah. They find the Ark of the Covenant. Like Sala and Indy like raise it up, and there's this whole glowing light, just like the same with the idol in the beginning, and described by Spielberg. This is actually, he calls this God light. So it's like light, like alien spaceship light coming from the sky, or a super bright light coming from a doorway. In the Indiana Jones franchise, it is the treasure. It's the Holy Grail, where we see the God light. So Sala goes back up. Indiana Jones is ready to get this Ark of the Covenant out of there. However, Nazis show up, capture Sala, and toss Marion
you were just opening up things in their dig site. Like, you are surrounded by Nazis. Of course they're going to come find you.
Shocker. They found him.
Yeah. So they put Jones and Marion down into the snake pit. First off, guys, you have guns. Always just kill your enemies. Don't give them a chance to escape and come back. So they're sealed inside this chamber, but they do escape thanks to very well crafted but convenient set pieces. I did enjoy the set, but you could clearly tell that like they were either fiberglass or paper mache, like blocks, which of course they are, right? There's no CGI. I appreciate that it's all practical. I don't think it looked bad. It was just funny, like when a statue would fall into a wall and the blocks were just like a wall of cardboard box, just kind of like do 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 do, like a video game.
Love the sets, love the set pieces. Everything was super impressive. But I gotta hit a pause.
Yeah.
I gotta hit a timeout here, Nick. Is Marion mid? Because at the point of the snake pit scene, I'm thinking, okay, what has Marion, the character, done so far? She's given up the medallion. By coincidence, the one side that had the most useful information on it. She's doing a lot of yelling and complaining, and she's, hitting people with frying pans and boxes. But at the same time, she's just doing nothing but getting captured and imprisoned twice. Or she saved Indy at the bar in Nepal. But that's pretty much it at this point.
But it's kind of her fault that they were there and, the Nazis were there in Nepal. She should have just given Indy the medallion and called it a day.
And speaking of how they conveniently find a way out, it's Indiana Jones that does this. So Marion doesn't do anything. She's just kind of the girl there. So it's not really Marion's fault. It's not Karen Allen's fault. If anything, Karen Allen was trying to input as much character as she could into this role, but it's really just like the writing. At this point, I'm thinking Marion hasn't really contributed a whole lot. And if she has, it's really just like a sidekick role. The character of Marion was included to just play the role as the girl in the room.
To be fair, there was a scene that we glossed over or skipped over entirely where she does have a chance to outwit and kill Bullock.
Oh, and
that was a good scene for her. Yeah, she does. She pulls her drinking game trick on him, steals a knife.
So she's being held captured in a tent, and Belloc comes in, and he's kind of like, oh, I want to see you in this dress. And then this was real life Karen Allen and what's his face, Paul Freeman. This is Paul Freeman and Karen Allen actually developing the story, and they make suggestions to Spielberg and say, oh, what if Marion had no reason to put on the dress, but she would so that she can cover up the fact that she's going to grab this knife with her old clothes. And then we're going to bring back the high alcohol tolerance of the beginning scene that we saw her in. And we're going to pretend like she's going to escape with her alcohol drinking abilities because she's an alcoholic.
It's her superpower.
I would say that's cool and great. However, the scene ends with Toit like a toy coming in, and he just puts the whole kibosh on it.
Well, because he has people with guns.
But it's all for naught.
She's a resourceful survivor. I'd say I'll give her that much.
Yeah,
I know she gets captured a lot, but I feel like that's not her fault.
It's not.
It's
her
never
fault.
just like one guy who gets her. It's usually like a group of Nazis, and
it's not the character's fault. It's just I feel like the way the character was written. So I feel like she's not bringing a whole lot to the table. However, Karen Allen is trying to input as much character as she can into the character of Marion. That's how I felt.
Yeah, I personally thought her character was fine. She kind of got roped into this. It's not like she was like gung-ho on the adventure. She got roped in. She's doing the best she can as a character, and she's doing pretty well. She's surviving, Nazi imprisonment. She does at one point get in the gun of a plane we'll see here later and probably rip through about 8 Nazis.
Oh, let's get to that right now.
Yeah, this is the next scene.
So they escape the Well of Souls, and I think they discover or learn or assume that the Ark of the Covenant is going to get loaded onto this airplane.
Again, they're just waltzing across the tarmac as Indy and Marion.
Indiana Jones just like walks up to the tarmac. There's no security. There's just the pilot in the plane. And I called this guy like the plane's bodyguard because it's like this gargantuan man who is, he's played by a gentleman named Pat Roach, who, again, this is going back to the actors playing 2 characters. He actually played a supersized person in the Nepal bar fight.
Nice. Was he on the Nazi side in the bar fight? Because it could just be the same guy. Or are they credited as different names?
They credited him as like I think a Sherpa or something.
Gotcha. But
he comes out, he sees Indiana Jones messing with the plane. So obviously he's like, I'm going to fight this guy. And Indy is totally outmatched. Marion does have, again, this is like, I saved Indy, so I'm doing something. The pilot pulls out a gun and he's about to shoot Indiana Jones, but Marion like throws a wheel chalk at him, which I don't know how heavy those things are, especially for a plane, but she can do it.
Got to be heavy.
She actually knocks out the pilot. The pilot gets on the controls and makes the plane start rotating on the ground. Now we got like this kind of physical gag of the airplane spinning. It's knocking into the gas tanker. It's letting gas loose. So we're like, okay, things are unraveling like a Pee Wee Herman breakfast machine, whatever those things are called.
Indy and the big guy are fighting underneath the plane as the propellers are flying around. Yeah.
The pilot, by the way, who is played by Frank Marshall, who is a producer on this movie, he was actually filling in for a couple sick stuntmen. And this is actually the husband of Kathleen Kennedy. Kathleen Kennedy was credited as an associate to Mr. Spielberg on this movie, but you might know her as, I don't know, the president of Lucasfilm.
Yes, we would.
It's all in the fam, baby. So, Marion gets in the gun of the airplane. She's mowing down some Nazis. What's more violent than that is the way this big Nazi dies. He gets absolutely pulverized by the propeller, which is probably the most violent death in this movie.
Easily.
What's more violent than that in real life is that Harrison Ford actually tore his ACL during this scene because the plane wheel ran over his leg. So what do you do, Nick, when you tear your ACL in today's times? You take a whole season off. You take the whole year off. You say prayers up, thoughts and prayers. What does Harrison Ford do?
Carries on.
Wraps it up, puts ice on it, and says, time to move on to the next scene.
Gotta do it.
Harrison Ford's built different, and I don't know what to say.
That you said it. Built different.
We think we thwart the Ark of the Covenant flying off, but then turns out it's on this truck. This whole convoy scene is actually the handiwork of the second unit director, Michael Moore. No, not that Michael Moore, just another guy who happens to be named Michael Moore. Spielberg had storyboarded the entire truck scene, but he really handed the reins off to Mickey Moore. He called him Mickey as a nickname. So there's some really great stunt work here. There's, the stunt guy going underneath the truck. Mm-hmm. Michael Moore said that this whole truck sequence took 6 to 8 weeks.
Jeez.
But earlier, Steven Spielberg said that they were only in Tunisia for 4.5 weeks. So it got me thinking, was the entire truck second unit shooting longer than the principal shooting? Might be like a little bit of a misremembering there, but that'd be kind of insane.
Maybe they were cleaning up some extra shots or something. I don't know.
Yeah, because you have like the far shots with the stuntman, and then you have to bring in Harrison Ford for the close-ups. But I just thought that was wild. So Michael Moore juiced up this scene. Shout out to Mickey Moore. Filmmaking, it's a team sport. We also get a Wilhelm scream at 1 hour, 24 minutes, and 3 seconds.
Nice call out.
You get a Nazi doing the
I like that. So Jones does capture this truck, and alongside Marion, he arranges the transport arc to London, arranged by Sala. Sala's just a good dude, good friend through and through.
Super useful.
Yeah. When they say goodbye, he gives a big old hug to Indy. Just,
Marion lays it on Sala. Marion kisses Sala on the lips, and Sala was thinking about it for a second.
Yeah,
he was like, I could leave my wife and 15 kids for this.
Yeah, he's just a man. However, while they're on this boat, a German U-boat intercepts them and seizes the Ark and Marion, so she gets captured again. The captain of the boat, who was a friend to Sala, tells the Nazis, I killed Indiana Jones, so no, don't worry about him. Now, I have a question for you, because he was hiding in one of those big ship pipes. I don't know what those are. I don't know. It's usually
it looks
like an exhaust pipe.
Yeah.
It looks like a big exhaust pipe. And Indiana Jones' kind of head is sticking through it, so he's watching the scene happening on the deck of the boat. It looked like Belloc saw him. Did you get that feeling?
I did not catch that.
Well, it looks like, and so this is kind of where like they have a respect for each other almost. And maybe it's just, it's not the case and I'm reading into it, but it looks like, because Belloc's facing that pipe and somebody talks to him and it almost looks like Belloc's giving like these side eyes, like, what the fuck? Is anyone else seeing this?
You know what? If that is true, probably there's probably mutual respect there, because if no one else notices this, he, even earlier in the movie, he says, oh, it's a shame if I have to kill you because no one's going to be a worthy adversary of mine.
Yeah.
So I'll be kind of sad to see you go. So if no one else notices this and he doesn't need to go through the theatrics of executing Indiana Jones, I can see that happening. That's a good catch.
So Indy then gets onto the U-boat as the rest of the crew of the main boat like cheer him on. Like, yeah, go Indy. You're like, all right, this guy's hitting the U-boat, which travels to an island in the Aegean Sea, and they want to test the power of the Ark before presenting it to Hitler. But on this island, our boy Indy ambushes the Nazi group and threatens to destroy the Ark.
Now, how does he ambush them, Nick?
They're walking through like this little valley, and Indy's up above, and he got his hands on an RPG.
RPG, gentlemen.
RPG, gentlemen!
So he pulls a Hendershot and just grabs an RPG out of nowhere.
Call back to year one, Maximum Overdrive. Did you think Hendershot was getting a shout out? He is.
And he's like, I'll just blow y'all up.
Super fun fact about this canyon. This is this RPG scene where Indy pulls a Hendershot. This is the same exact shooting location where R2-D2 gets captured by Jawas in A New Hope. So homeboy, associate producer Robert Watts, when he said, hey, let's go to Tunisia because we've been there, I'm familiar with it. They literally just reuse the same locations. They're like, we've been there with A New Hope.
It's like, I know the perfect place.
I know the permits. I know the crew to hire. Yeah, it's just like, let's just do it here.
Unfortunately for Indy, he did not follow the rule. Don't point a weapon at somebody if you're not prepared to fire it. Because Belloc basically says, you're not going to blow up the Ark of the Covenant, dude. Come on. You care too much about this. Like, so he's like, you're right. It's like, why would you pop up with an RPG if you were never going to fire it?
Shock value, Nick. Shock value.
Got to commit.
But Jones is not like Belloc. He's not like the dark side, shadowy reflection, like you said earlier.
He still has morals. So they restrain Jones and Marion at this testing site. They kind of like put him on like a pole, kind of like tie him up back to back on a pole.
Mm-hmm.
And Belloc ceremonially opens the Ark, and there's only sand inside. They're like, what? All of a sudden, we start getting some of that God light, if I can call back. Things start glowing, things start moving. Some like spirits start coming out of the Ark, and you're like, whoa. The Nazis are like, this is crazy. It's worked. It is this ancient power we can use. And all of a sudden, Indy just goes, Marion, like, close your eyes. Whatever you do, don't look at it. Because the Ark starts releasing these spirits, and all of a sudden the spirits turn into demons and start raising all sorts of hell and murdering.
So the Ark of the Covenant spawns the Nazis. And I don't mean spawn as the definition. I mean from the movie Spawn that we watched last year, where Spawn like just shoots electricity through all the other demons. That's exactly what's happening with the Ark of the Covenant. It is shooting electricity through all the Nazis and exploding them. Some of their faces are melting. Belloc's head explodes.
Just does it.
Toy like a toiga. His face melts. This is like the super memed moment where his special effects head just melts off a skull. It's pretty great.
That I will say, like, that's probably like my first memory of this movie.
Yeah.
It's like that scene right there. Just like, just the melting.
I think they need to like add some flame overlay on top of Paul Freeman's head exploding in order to not be R-rated.
I can see that. You can't just JFK him like that. Just...
But you can.
Yeah. Eventually, Indy and Marion open their eyes. I don't know how they escaped from this pole they were on, but they're just like open their eyes.
No, I saw this actually. The electricity, just like Escape from LA, just by chance, the electricity burned off Indy's ropes.
Very nice. Very good.
Because he didn't look. He respected the Ark because he respects artifacts.
Yeah, he didn't look. Yeah,
relics.
The demons flew around him and they kind of like looked at him like, don't you fucking look at me. And then like they didn't look. And so the demons were just like, all right, we're going to go this way. Honestly, for 1981, pretty happy with the effects. All things said and done for the spirits flying around.
No idea if it got remastered. It didn't look super refined, so I don't think it did. But the CGI computer effects were never really a focal point or a thing in this movie.
Yeah, never took me out of it. No, I didn't laugh at the scene like I have others.
Speaking of JFK, we go back to Washington, D.C.
So back in Washington, the government, thanks Jones, and Indy's like, let me study it. Like, you have no idea the power that you're dealing with. And then here comes again another iconic scene / meme of they're like, it's being taken care of by top men. Says a guy with a pipe in his mouth, and they go, top men. And then we see the Ark getting wheeled into this giant warehouse with other crates. So we're like, oh, how many artifacts does this U.S. government have? Also, Indy is very unhappy with this outcome.
Super unhappy.
And there's this really, really cheesy line where he goes, "They don't know what they have in there." And Marion looks at him and goes, "But I know what I have out here."
Oh my God.
You're
Yeah.
like,
And this was summing up my feelings of the Marion character. I was like, oh my God. Okay.
Didn't have to do that one, Marion.
And then the funny thing is, she's like, "Let's go get a drink." And I'm like, yeah, because you're an alcoholic.
You're just because you haven't had a drink in 4 hours and you're jonesing.
She's Indiana Jonesing for a drink. And that's plot talk for Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Perfect. All right, James, what do you say? You got any nitpicks on this movie?
Nitpicks.
Yeah, I have a couple nitpicks. It was the light. Like Indiana Jones just has this sixth sense about lights and the supernatural effect of lights. So he just knows about the light trap in the opening scene with just based on instinct. And he also knows not to look at the light at the end of the movie. So how does he know this? He just knows?
So I have no answer for how the light trap works.
Also, yeah, how the light trap
discussed.
works is
No
a
answer.
question. We're just going to chalk it up to it's a movie.
But my answer for this, for the first light trap, I think it sets up the character of Indiana Jones. Like, I'm so well studied. I'm so smart. I know so much about this stuff that I can basically see it coming before anyone else does. Like, that's kind of my superpower, is I know how these ancient Peruvians built these traps and these tribes built these traps. Therefore, I can see it coming.
Okay.
Same with like the sandbag replacing the idol. Like he's a man with a plan. So
Fair enough.
I would say it's important for that reason.
I can check that box as resolved.
Perfect.
Not for how the light trap works, but how he knows about it.
No idea.
No idea how it works. How'd they rig that? You got any nitpicks?
Yeah, what I brought up earlier. So now let's get into it. Like for 75% of the movie, or the 75% of times that Nazis are around, they're just operating in plain sight. They're waltzing through the dig site. They're on the tarmac. They're using the staff of Ra. And I'm like, this is the room where you're trying to find where it's. There should be people manning this room all the time. They're just walking around where they're not.
Yep. I had the same exact thought. Indy is pretty much free to do whatever the hell he wants at this City of Tanis dig site. He waltzes onto the alleged secured suspected grounds of Tanis. Sala and him are the only two at the map room entrance in the wide open, and no one cares. He waltzes on into the prisoner tent where they're holding Marion.
Yeah.
Has a one-on-one with her. Sidebar for this scene. Again, Marion is kind of shelved and put off to the side because Indiana Jones comes in. This is the first time he realizes that she's not dead.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh my God, you're alive."
Well, he plants a big old smooch on her.
And she's like, "Yeah, you got to get me out of here." And he's like, he literally puts the gag back on her. He's like, "I need you to stay here for a little bit longer." It's like, oh my God, they're Marion treatment. They're shelving this character.
It made sense. He's like, if I free you, it's going to alert everybody. So I have to keep you here.
Fine, fair. Going back to Indiana Jones waltzing around.
But he still just waltzes into that tent.
He waltzes into the tent. They're able to pull a graveyard shift squad to begin digging at the real location of the Well of Souls. He waltzes on up to the airplane. He's doing so much waltzing on these grounds. He should be on Dancing with the Stars, is what I'm saying. So he goes to the airplane that the Ark is supposed to be being loaded onto. He hops on the plane. He steals a horse. Like, no one ever bats an eye.
No.
Like, no one cares.
I think about when on the tarmac, when Sala pulls him into that tent, he's like really loud. He's like, "Indy, you're alive." And I'm like, keep it down, dude.
Very, very, I'll shout out that shot. Very cool shot.
Yes.
Because Sala and Indiana Jones and Marion are silhouettes, shadows in the foreground. And the background is the airplane on fire and all the Egyptian diggers running over to it. There's a lot going on. This movie is shot very beautifully, and shout outs to it.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, I'm going to move on to some talking points here. I'm going to talk about what if. Now, this is a typical talking point we have with movies. We usually talk about who could be potentially casted in this and start a whole new timeline of reality. So we talked about the Danny DeVito almost being Sala. However, they screen tested a bunch of guys for Indiana Jones, and they actually screen tested Tom Selleck. They were sold on Tom Selleck. They're like, "We want Selleck. Let's go, baby."
Who doesn't love Tom Selleck?
So they were set on Tom Selleck. However, Bob Daly, who was the head of CBS at the time, who became pretty good friends with Spielberg, he axed the Selleck idea because guess what? He had a whole series commitment for this little show called Magnum PI. So he couldn't do Indiana Jones. So then they turned to Harrison Ford, who George Lucas was a little reluctant because he's like, dude, I've had Harrison Ford in 2 of my movies. I don't want to be like the guy who just goes back to my one guy because I can't find anybody else. But guess what? They got Harrison Ford and he was the perfect fit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this started just a huge run for Harrison Ford. I think he did Apocalypse Now in 79. Obviously was Han Solo, and then Blade Runner, and then Episode 6, and then Temple of Doom. Later on the next decade, Patriot Games. I mean, and then The Fugitive. I mean, I could go on, but for like 15 years, he was just
the guy.
He was the man.
What's a talking point that you have?
Yeah, so I've done a lot of I've not done a lot of research. I've watched a lot of things on this. I've done reading on this because I find it fascinating. A lot of this movie is based in reality in the fact that Nazis were constantly looking for magical artifacts. They believed in a lot of the occult stuff, a lot of conspiracy theories. So like in reality, true story, the Nazis actually were searching for the Holy Grail. They took a lot of expeditions looking for it. They believed in the lost city of Atlantis. They actually believed that the master race that they were talking about were born from Atlanteans, this lost civilization. So the Nazi master race were from Atlantis. They tried to attract UFOs to get aliens to help them kind of conquer the world.
I didn't know Nazi Germany was conceived in a insane asylum.
It pretty much was. And one of the main Nazi officers, Heinrich Himmler, I believe it was. We dealt with Himmler back in Schindler's List. But his main confidant, like the person he turned to for like spiritual advice, was this nut job who believed that Atlantis was around back when the earth had 3 suns and giants roamed the earth. And so they were constantly looking for like lost civilizations with these like mystical powers. So
L. Ron Hubbard is like, I was born in the wrong decade.
He probably would have been.
He would have been so on board with this.
I'm not going to sit here and say L. Ron Hubbard would have been a Nazi, but they have a lot in common.
Maybe thank God he was born in the decade he was.
Or thank whoever.
Thank Zorb.
Thanks, Zorb. So yeah, no, I thought it was interesting because obviously I'm not sure if they ever looked for the Ark of the Covenant per se, but the Nazis were constantly running these missions to try and find these artifacts to gain these mystical powers during the war. So there's a bit of it that's sort of rooted in reality.
That's a nice draw for audiences because everyone can always get on board with anti-Nazi movies.
The best villains.
If it's somewhat true, that's even better.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that up. I had a question for you. Does the ending feel almost open-ended? Because Indy is not happy with the moral result of where the Ark ended up. And it pretty much violates his entire character's inner conflict with protecting antiquities and relics. Like we touched upon, Marion doesn't care. She's like, let's go get a drink because she's an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. And we end on the Ark getting stored in this massive army storage facility. I was thinking maybe if Indy believed it was in good hands, but then we secretly reveal that it's not in good hands, it would have maybe made for a better ending. What'd you feel about that? Because this entire story of Indiana Jones is like, I need to protect treasures. By the end of it, you're thinking, cool, it's out of the Nazis' hands. All is good. But then we kind of end on a wah, wah.
Yeah, I didn't think about this when I watched it, but now that you bring it up, I see what you're saying. It does still feel like he still has the moral high ground and those around him don't. So he's saying, you guys don't know what you have in there. Like, trust you. Obviously you're not going to open it. You haven't seen it. And they're like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Him and Marion are still the only people alive who know what happens when you open the Ark. And so it's still a little bit of a, I'm still the hero moment, even though I kind of got screwed over in this whole Ark thing. Or maybe the government does know. And that's why they're just like putting it away forever. I think a cool ending. Hear me out here.
I'm hearing you.
They're putting it away. They store it. You zoom out. Camera pans over. One of the vents, the duct vents, pops open. and Indy's coming out of it. He's going to go in there and steal it back from the government.
Whoa. And then that would wrap up the Ark of the Covenant storyline.
Spoiler alert, we've seen the other movies. The Ark doesn't really come back into play.
No. I think Temple of Doom is actually a prequel. I think it actually takes place a year before Raiders.
My last talking point here is just the good balance of comedy sprinkled in. So we touched on a couple of the things. The spider on the back scene was actually kind of funny because Indy has a spider on him. And then Satipo, is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah, Alfred Molina's character has a spider on him and he like brushes it off and then he like turns around and his back's filled with spiders and Indy's kind of like, oh boy.
There's a lot of those like reveals. Like he turns around, there's a bunch of spiders. The guy that falls down, he has like 30 poison needles in his back. When Indiana Jones runs over the hill by himself, then there's like 30 guys behind him. There's a lot of those like, it's fine. And then turn around reveal, oh, it's saturated with a problem.
The sword fight scene, obviously, where Indy shoots the guy. The basket carrying scene, funny. The monkey Sieg Heil salute, kind of
Nazi
funny.
Monkey, hashtag Nazi monkey.
Yeah. And then there's a really funny one in the scene that we've skipped over, but then gone back to a lot, where Marion is in the captive and she's going to escape. Tot shows up.
Creepy Tot.
Tote shows up.
Tote bag.
And he reaches in his bag and he pulls out like what looks like nunchucks. And they're like, oh my God, what is he going to do to us?
Like a torture device.
And then he folds the nunchucks into a hanger and hands it to his guy and takes his coat off and puts it on the hanger. And they both like, Marion and Belloc both like breathe a sigh of relief. It's like,
and then when it's revealed as the hanger, they go, oh. The funny thing with the nunchuck hanger is that Steven Spielberg actually repetitively tried to put this gag into his movies. So he put it into a movie called 1941, but it didn't really work out and the laugh didn't really land. So he kept putting it into his movies until it had a proper placement. And finally it found its way into Raiders of the Lost Ark. So this was a gag that Spielberg thought was hilarious. And he's like, I'm putting this in a movie until it works. And I think it works here.
Good on him for the perseverance. Cause it was great. And I think there was just a perfect balance of comedy and lightheartedness plugged into this movie.
Awesome.
One thing we haven't talked about, but we should talk about, I don't have this written down, so I'm just kind of hitting you blind. The score, the iconic
score. Oh my God.
We didn't
even say that John Williams was on the track.
John Williams on the track. Ba, 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 ba,
this is our first John Williams scored movie. I think it is.
It might be.
We would have shouted him out. I don't think we had any year one John Williams movies.
No, but he comes in and absolutely
slays,
kills it, dude. When you think of Indiana Jones, like the first thing you think about is that iconic. Exactly. So it couldn't go without calling that out.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Because the music also kept it lighthearted, right? Like that score kind of keeps it's bouncy, it's fun, it's iconic, it's actiony. It's just perfect.
It's just an old school action adventure movie. And that's exactly what I have for you for my sarcastic selling point. If I were describing any modern day treasure hunting movie, I would say this is Indiana Jones meets this. However, this is the first to just do it right, do it fun. So my sarcastic selling point is that this is Indiana Jones. Leather jacket wearing, snake fearing, archaeologist badass with a whip.
I love it. My sarcastic selling point, hand to God. I wrote this down on my sheet of paper before you told me about these serials. And I said, this is an archaeologist James Bond.
Oh, interesting. All right. You nailed it, buddy.
No. Spielberg nailed it.
Final review. Fight.
Let's look into what the other guys are saying about Raiders of the Lost Ark from 1981. Rotten Tomatoes critics. 93% of the critics thought that this was a pretty darn good movie.
Very nice. The people have it slightly higher at a 96. This is a beloved movie by the people.
Even more fans liked it. This is where we're going to get real because Metacritic comes in. This is the average weighted reviews from back in the day from 1981 up until now, whatever reviews came out from then until now. Weighing the opinions of the critics, it's a very respectable 86.
Very nice. And the people, again, 3 points higher there at 89.
And now our whip cracking, snake facing, boulder chasing, Nazi monkey hating, wild score from IMDb, 8.4. New year, never miss a beat. We are still on top of it, in sync.
Look at us go.
Can't compete.
Look at us go.
Bitch. Okay, so that's what the other guys are saying. Now it's time to see what we are saying. Nick, I'm kicking off the year with my review coming first because you provided your review of Santa Claus Conquers the Martians first.
All right.
From last year. So I am up, baby. I'm going to hit you with my laughable log line, followed by my popcorn points, and summed up with my final thoughts of this movie.
Let's hear it.
An archaeologist bests baddies, boulders, and booby traps to find an ancient holy treasure, battling Hitler's conquest, his French adversary, and a Nazi monkey. Nick, the rating. Oh, man. It all comes back to, do I rank this for what it is? Or do I keep it on the same plane? Because George Lucas's, his original pitch for this movie was that it literally stemmed from a nostalgic early 20th century form of storytelling known as serials. So I knew that this movie was going to be mostly action, mostly nonstop fun. But like I touched upon, I felt like you really had to dig for the story. But at the same time, I feel like this movie was just so well made and the film craft was just so taken seriously. I feel like it still deserves, coming out hot, 2024, 8.3 popcorn points, baby.
Okay.
This is movie popcorn, shared bag for me. Watching a making of this movie and Spielberg explaining how they removed hundreds of TV antennas from the roofs of the buildings in Kairouan just to get the wide shot of Indy and Marion meeting up with Sala on the veranda overlooking the 1930s city of Cairo, just sums up the spirit of this type of filmmaking, obsessively doing stuff strictly just to deliver authenticity. These guys are taking their craft seriously. And in this case, that craft was delivering a throwback style action hero movie that stemmed from their own childhood nostalgia of watching these serials in the movie theaters as kids. And in that regard, I think they killed it. They delivered. The crux of this, however, I feel like when you get too obsessed with the technical aspects and the filmmaking craft, it kind of distracts you from developing that the juicy story and really fleshing out the characters. Like I touched upon, I felt like Marion wasn't really built up correctly. I don't think they utilized her correctly. I didn't really think that the danger of the arc was built up. I mean, they kind of dropped hints of that it's super powerful and blah, 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 but they didn't really like drop any clues of what it's actually capable of. And Sala is definitely super utilized in the movie. I feel like he was kind of utilized too much to move the plot along, because he is like the hookup with the dig site. He's the hookup with the boat guy. He just kind of helps Indiana Jones along the way. However, I think he's just the actor John Rhys-Davies is just so good at his role that he sells this as an important character and not as a plot device. And Indy is developed through his physical gags and his conflicts. His vulnerability shines through being outmatched, whether it's in a fist fight or a shootout or a car chase. And the improvising really resonates with us as an audience. He's not like a Snake Plissken or a James Bond or I'm a man who always has a plan. He literally says, I'm making this up as I go. He's an everyman, and audiences resonate with that. So I feel like Indiana Jones was just a really great character. Mm-hmm. Story-wise, I don't really think there's a whole lot here. And if I had to dig for the story, like I'm Indiana Jones, and as he digs for treasure, I feel like the story aspects come in breadcrumb form. The little crumbs of the story and Indy's thirst for adventure, him discovering these artifacts, his conflicts with making sure these relics and artifacts don't get exploited. He's a history man. It's kind of brought up in what I felt was a little bit shoehorned in of the not so different conversation. It does come back into play during the RPG scene, but these are just kind of like tiny little pins of story plotted along through this grand-esque, crazy, super impressive production value action adventure movie. You know me, I'm big on story and character development. So the ending makes it seem like all is good, but then it seems like all is for naught. But it kind of makes it feel like this ending is ultimately better because it kind of comes off as like Indy at the end of the day has no control of these artifacts. They don't belong to him. They don't belong to the government. They don't belong to the Nazis. And it's kind of like a reality check for Indy that I think the ending kind of fits. All in all, I feel like the original concept and inspiration of these was based off these nonstop action shorts where Spielberg and Lucas were obsessed about the filmmaking craft and delivering what they were looking for what they wanted to watch when they were kids. And I feel like the character development and the storylines kind of take a back seat to this super fun, but very impressive production. But all in all, I feel like the filmmaking aspect is too good that I'm not going to drop it into the 7s. At the end of the day, I do feel like there's not a lot of story here. And just to grade it on the same plane, I think the filmmaking craft is so good that it just ups the ante and it kind of carries the lack of story, carries the lack of certain characters being underdeveloped. It's an 8.3. You know, these guys stemmed this from their nostalgia watches from these movie theaters and created Indiana Jones. And one of my all-time favorite video games, Uncharted, guess what movie franchise that was based off of and models exactly.
I'd never guess.
Indiana Jones. Art from the 30s inspires creatives in the 80s. Art from the 80s inspires creatives in the 2010s. So, you know, who knows from in like 30 years, someone's going to make another iteration inspired by Uncharted, inspired by Indiana Jones, these serials from the 30s. Someone in 50 years might be inspired. They might have grown up on the Pirates movies and thought, I need to make a pirate franchise and make it the best ever pirate franchise ever.
More pirates.
Super impressive filmmaking. Could have used a little bit more story. Does it need it? No, because I had a lot of fun.
Nice breakdown, bud.
Thank you.
Let me give you my breakdown here. First, my laughable logline. A super cool whip-wielding archaeology professor decides to use his powers to destroy the Nazis.
Nice.
I give it an 8.5.
Nice.
Big fan of this movie for multiple reasons. While we do want to, you know, keep things on an even playing field with all the movies we watch and not, you know, say like, oh, but is it what it is? I do usually give a little extra points for maybe call it trend setting, you know, doing something iconic, coming out there and trying to do something new.
Now this was a pitfall
before others did it.
We talked about in the hot corn seat.
I know. But for me, I still give it a pass on some certain things. As far as, you know, what you were talking about with this being a serial, I'm much less concerned, and maybe this is having seen the other movies after this, about some of the character development, because we usually don't carry over the same characters from story to story. It almost feels like a really long TV episode where, you know, things in the beginning are the same as things are at the end. And you make sure that, you know, nothing changes too much in the main overarching story. Indy's still Indy. This is one of his adventures. And when the next movie starts, this will be just another one of his adventures. Like we talked about the way the movie started, we're entering, you know, right in the middle of his career. And so the story not being told of why he is the way he is or what happened between him and Marion, I can forgive because they're just right. We're hopping into the middle of it. And here's the story. I think it'd be a lot worse if they had the lack of story development, but they were trying to tell you who Indy was. I felt like they were never really interested in that. And I feel like that's okay, given, you know, the kind of story they were trying to tell. You do get a little minus points for lack of story, but you get a lot more minus points if you try to tell a story like Fifth Element and fail.
Oh,
right. Like that was your goal and you failed.
Great point.
For me, I can look over some of the story pitfalls, and then the ending. Again, maybe this is just because I've seen, you know, Temple of Doom and whatnot and Last Crusade, but I know that Marion's not going to be in the next movie. She was just a character that picked up here. Like they said, kind of inspired by James Bond. That was very similar to James Bond, right? A new woman kind of came in and was the side piece for that movie and part of the adventure. And that was the bad guy. And we move on to the next one. Super fun movie, man. I mean, just a fun ride, fun to watch. It's so well done. Like you said, the cinematography, they were doing a lot of stuff, taking chances on it. surprised at only $18 million, honestly, even given the location shooting, what they were able to do with that. You do get a few points from me for doing a lot with what you had. I mean, it was 81, so $18 million isn't nothing, but regardless, just all really well done. Again, the score, the John Williams score, I mean, it's such an iconic movie, and there's a reason it's iconic. It's because they did so well in creating it. So it's an 8.5 for me, just solidly right there among great movies.
What a way to start out this year. This is the best start to a season we've had, because season 1, Mad Max, we were at 7.2, a 6.7. Season 2, Escape from LA, you gave that a 3.2. I gave it a 6.8. We're starting out 2024 in the 8s, baby. Pretty close together, I might add. 0.2 off.
Nowhere to go but down, buddy.
Nowhere to go but down. So I feel like it's going to be a great season. You should join us as we watch a movie that stars a person that played a vampire hunter in a movie we watched last year.
A movie I've never seen.
Have you heard of this movie?
Excited. I have heard of this movie.
Okay.
I'll tell you what, this movie has a very iconic name.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch it. I've heard it be referenced to. I have never seen it, and I'm ready to dive into it. And I hope everyone else is ready to dive into it. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please follow us on socials at Just Play It Pod on Twitter, and follow us on Instagram and YouTube at Just Play It Podcast. We are back. We are here for you, and we're back next week. Thank you so much for listening. We're heading gone for the first time of 2024. We'll see y'all next week. Remember, if you're getting chased down by a boulder and you hate snakes, you better have that whip ready, man. And whip it good. In the background, she's just beating 2 guys with a metal box.
I'm not going to sit here and accuse Indiana Jones of being a pedophile.